Hello and welcome back. You're looking at Matthew Tkachuk, who was the #1 buy low target in my video exactly 1 month ago today. Since then, 14 games, 7 goals, 14 assists, 21 points, a point and a half per game in that span, 9 power play points, a game winner, and he was 5th in NHL scoring during the last month. So he's been getting it done. The Panthers are 9-1 in their last 10. I featured Reinhart last week, and this week we got to give it up to Tkachuk. But these guys are all owned up. So let's see who you can target heading into week 15 for fantasy. So we'll do what we usually do and now turn towards the schedule. So 13 teams play 4 times this week. There will be a lot of volume and it's pretty well spread out. You can see the light nights are possibly Tuesday, depending on how you classify it, Wednesday, Friday, and possibly Sunday. So depends on where your cutoff is for a light night. Mine was around 6 games for what this constitutes, but these are kind of light nights, so we can maybe factor that in a little bit. And as you can see here, there are a couple of teams that are better than others in terms of schedule. You do have the Islanders, Devils, and Minnesota with 2 light nights, and they have 4 games this week. So we will feature some of those guys. We're not necessarily going to go into Minnesota, as they do have a bunch of really difficult matchups towards the back half of the week. But there are some guys that we can look for from these teams, which we'll get to in just a second. Now, this Detroit schedule, it's only 3 games, but it's all light nights. They are on the road, and it is a difficult schedule, but these are all light nights, so they will get into your lineup, and that could be beneficial if you've got a lot of guys in on Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. So we'll look at that schedule in a little bit more detail. And then you also have the Florida Panthers with a Monday, Wednesday, Friday split. So 2 light nights, maybe a third. I mean, this is not a light night. It's, usually Monday is, but they've got 10 games on this Monday. So that's going to be a little bit heavier, but it is a nice matchup against Anaheim. So that could be an interesting play. And if I'm Florida, I'm putting Anthony Stolarz in for that game. Stolarz will be featured in our goalie section of this video. But before we do anything else, let's take a look at how you can maximize the games played this week. So what you can do here, you can start one of these teams here, pick up a player from one of these teams at the front end of the week with a back-to-back. So Monday, Tuesday, back-to-back. These are all the teams that have a Monday, Tuesday, back-to-back. If you wanted to pick up Lekkonen's coming back off of an injury, that could be an option for you. There's a number of guys in LA getting it done. We'll go over some of the Islanders that you can pick up. There's usually players available from San Jose, maybe a Thomas Hertl. This is a nice, favorable schedule for them, all things considered, even though they're terrible. So you pick up a guy from one of these 2 teams, you get these 2 games played, then you drop that player, and there's one team that plays a Wednesday, Thursday back-to-back, and that is Montreal. They're at the Devils and at Ottawa, so you could go and pick up somebody from Montreal. There's a number of options on the waiver wire there. Then the best thing to do would be to pick up somebody who has a Friday, Sunday start. So you're looking at Carolina, Detroit, Minnesota, and then you also have the Islanders options here. But if you're going to pick up Islanders, you might as well stay with them all week, as you'll get that front half back-to-back and then the Friday, Sunday. So from these teams, I mean, again, you would potentially be able to pick up somebody from Carolina. There might be some options for you on the wire. We'll go over Detroit in just a minute. And then from Minnesota, they do have these Friday, Sunday games, but they are very difficult competition here with very low-scoring teams, 2 of the top 5 in terms of goals against over the last month. So this will be very difficult for offensive production. So we'll start by taking a look at some of the guys that you can pick up from the Detroit Red Wings. Now, again, this is a 3-game week, but they are all light nights. It is a little bit of a difficult schedule here, but you do have a lot of options from Detroit, as they do kind of spread out their scoring. You're not going to get Kane, you're not going to get DeBrincat, but you can get access to that through JT Compher. So he's centering that line. It's the second line, technically speaking, on daily faceoff, but Compher is also power play 1. So you're getting really good exposure through Compher to these guys. And Kane and DeBrincat have been very productive since being reunited this year, since Kane came over and signed. Compher is only 22% owned. He is center, so I'm not sure why he's only left wing, right wing right now, but he is multi-position eligible. Just not a lot of stats to go with this line assignment lately, so he hasn't necessarily lit it up, but this could be an opportunity to get out in front of it. The best guy, if you're looking for somebody who's hot right now, is David Perron, 41% owned, 5 points in his last 6, 3 power play points. He's on power play 1 as well. So he would be your best option if you wanted to ride a hot streak going into this week. If you're looking for hits and blocks specifically, Ben Sherratt, 17 hits, 17 blocks in the last 6 games. He also has a goal and an assist in that span, so not the most offensive player, but he is going to get you the hits and blocks, and if he can chip in offensively as well, that's a nice bonus on top of that. Now, Andrew Kopp has been ice cold pretty much all year, but he does have 3 points in his last 3 games. He's 4% owned, so he could be a deeper league play for you, but if you're going deeper league, I would prefer Robbie Fabry, who 2% owned, dual position eligible, 3 goals in his last 4 games, and he is power play 2, and he's currently 8th in the NHL in goals per 60. So he's a goal scorer. Goal scorers get hot. He's hot right now. You could ride that streak, and he's only 2% owned, so he's available for almost every league size. And last but not least, we do have to talk about their goaltending really quick. As you can tell, Husso is on the IR. They are running with Lyon and Reimer. Reimer's getting to start today, and then we have Lyon, who has been one of the better goaltenders who we will feature in the goaltending section, so stay tuned for that. But if you want to go for the 4-game week and you still want some of this light night action, you can go with some Islanders. Now, the Islanders are not necessarily the best team to pick from right now. A lot of guys are ice cold, or the scoring has kind of been stretched out across a number of different players, but some of these guys are usual suspects in terms of guys you would pick up, but for whatever reason, they're just not getting it done lately. Anders Lee, only 2 points in his last 5 games, but he does have a lot of shots and hits in that span. He's 30% owned. He's usually a 30-goal guy. Just hasn't been happening for him consistently this year. Then you also have Kyle Palmieri at 6% owned, a goal and assist, 2 power play points in the last 3 games. He's a power play goal kind of guy. That's what you're mainly looking for from him. Again, not the most productive, but he is one of those guys that you can look for. And we'll go to the scatter plot in just a second to show you why these guys are being suggested. Now, JG Pageau, if you're in a face-off league, you probably already own him or would want to. He's a very good face-off guy. He's got a goal and 6 hits in his last game. Very streaky, usually getting you the peripherals, definitely getting you the face-off wins, but every now and then he goes off for a really good game. And now let's take a look at the scatter plot to kind of show you what I'm talking about. All right, so up here you have the usual suspects, the guys that are actually getting it done: Barzell, Brock Nelson, Bo Horvat, and Noah Dobson. All of those guys are over 78% owned. Nelson's 78. Everybody else is higher than that. So you can't really get access to these guys. So this clump right here is the next tier of guys: Anders Lee, you have Kyle Palmieri, and JG Pageau. That's why I'm suggesting them here. It's basically the next best thing that you can get on the Islanders. You could go with Pulock. 2.6 blocks per game is really nice. A hit and a half per game or thereabouts. The shot volume is low. The points are low. But if you're looking for peripherals, you could go with Pulock. And then you also have Romanov, 2.3 blocks per game, 1.3 hits per game, a couple more shots, and a little bit more point production. So you could go with some of those guys. But for the most part, offensively speaking, these 3 are the guys that you have to go to. Every now and then they will get hot. They'll have somebody else go off. Julian Gauthier had a couple goals not that long ago. He's been hitting as well. Cal Clutterbuck is a usual hitter. 2.8 hits per game, 13 points on the year. So there are some other options, but not a lot of consistent options for the Islanders. But there is one other team that you can pick from to get some value this week, and that is the New Jersey Devils. Now, there's a number of guys going in the absence of Jack Hughes that is going to affect their power play numbers, and it will probably decrease Luke Hughes' value. Simone Nemec has been pretty good on that power play too. But we're going to start it off by talking about Michael McLeod. 5 points in his last 5 games. He's centering the second line right now. He's number 1 in the NHL in faceoff percentage at 66.4%. So if you're in a faceoff league, he's a must-own. And he is getting a decent line assignment right now, and he's been relatively productive in that line. 7% owned. He's probably there for you in most league sizes. Now, a guy we talked about last year, Eric Haula, 6 points in his last 5 games. He's top line with Hischier and Mercer. Speaking of Mercer, he's another guy, 31% owned, dual eligible, 7 points in his last 8 games. So Haula's been a little bit more productive, but Mercer also getting that top line power play usage, so that's probably why he's a little bit more valuable. And then we also have Alex Holtz here, 5 points in his last 5 games, only 2% owned, single position right winger. He's 21st in the NHL in 5-on-5 points per 60. So he's right behind Sidney Crosby, ahead of Gensel, Thomas, Stützle, etc. So he's a very prolific goal scorer at 5-on-5, just not getting a lot of ice time. But with some of these injuries that they've got, he is getting an elevated role, and he's got 5 points in his last 5 games. Some of these games that they have do lend themselves to some offense. Montreal and Columbus would be those 2 games specifically that I would look for some offense for. But these are guys that are all available on the wire, which is why we're featuring them here. And these are definitely guys that you would want access to, specifically because they're playing with some really good players still. They're playing with Hischier, at least Haula and Mercer are. For McLeod and Holtz, a couple different line assignments. It depends on the game. But they are getting elevated roles with the absence of some of their top guys. So this is why we're featuring them here. But that's going to do it for some of these guys. There's a number of other schedules we could have gone into. But again, a lot of teams, 13 teams play 4 times this week. So we just wanted to look at some of the better schedules this week before we tend to the goaltending now. So that's what we're going to switch to, is the goaltending. And we'll start it off by looking at some of the guys that you can get that are still starters. And then we'll look at some of the guys that are 1A, 1Bs, or backups. Now, as we look at the goaltending, one thing I want to bring to your attention, since December 14th, goals against per game, the top 5 teams: Winnipeg 1.64, Seattle 1.67, Calgary 2.29, Carolina 2.36, Florida 2.36, Philly is in 8th at 2.67, and St. Louis 10th at 2.85. So a lot of those goaltenders on this list are playing for those teams, and that's part of the reason why those teams have such good goals against, and vice versa. They're playing for good defensive teams. So we'll start it off with Sam Ersson, who Philly is 8th in that span in terms of goals against per game. Ersson, 5 wins in his last 8 games, 1.66 goals against, 2 shutouts, and a .941. You can see here 89th percentile in terms of goals against at 2.3, a .910 save percentage, and he's kind of taking over the role of starter for Carter Hart. Hart should be the starter, but he's been stealing starts from him, and he's only 33% owned, so he is available for a lot of you. And this would be an opportunity to go out and get a goaltender that's playing for a really good defensive team. And Philly is still chipping away at wins, and they're very impressive in doing so. And they just added a really good defenseman in Jamie Drysdale. So all things are pointing in the right direction for Philly, and you could get Sam Ersson right now. He's 33% owned, so he's probably available for you. Now, I mentioned earlier we would talk about Alex Lyon, and we will do that right now. .915 save percentage in his last 8 games, 5 wins, 2.91 goals against. And again, on the year, a .922 save percentage, 2.6 goals against. He is well above expected, 84th percentile there. And as I mentioned before, Husso's out, so it's between Lyon and Reimer for the starts, and I would assume Alex Lyon becomes the 1A, Reimer becomes the 1B, or the backup. And at 46% owned, he is probably one of the only starters that you can probably find. Now, Ersson has to split the net a little bit more with Hart. Lyon, I would assume, would be getting a little bit more of the start volume for Detroit. And in that span, Detroit has kind of chipped away. They were pretty unimpressive after getting Patrick Kane. They've been much better recently, so this could be a nice little play heading into this kind of a week. But another starter that we do have to talk about, and we were talking about him a lot before, is Charlie Lindgren. He did have a little bit of an injury issue. I'm not sure how or what that was or how long that might linger. But in his last 5 starts, 2 wins, which is not great, but 1.89 goals against and a .927 save percentage is great. He's 14.5 above expected, top 5 in that metric, 97th percentile on the hub. So very impressive. And he basically has slowly started to take the net from Darcy Kemper, who hasn't been great all season long. So a .928 save percentage on the year, 2.3 goals against. That kind of mirrors what you're seeing here over the last 5 starts. So he's been relatively consistent throughout the season at only 38% owned. He's, again, one of those good starters or 1As on a very good defensive team. They just have trouble scoring and getting him run support, which is why the wins are a little bit low. But he is another one of those starters you can get. But you might want to also think about going out and grabbing Antti Ranta. Now, Kochetkov is done for the foreseeable future with a concussion. Antti Ranta comes back in as the number 1. I spelled his name wrong there, my bad. 30% owned, 2 wins, .95 goals against, .968 save percentage in his last 3 starts. He is playing for one of the best defensive teams in the NHL. I just mentioned right off the top here that they are 4th in the NHL over the last month in terms of goals against per game. And obviously they are getting the run support with guys like Aho and Svech going off. So this is definitely a guy, if you can go out and grab him on the wire, he's probably going to get a lot of the starts for the Canes going forward. And 30% owned, he's probably there for you in most league formats. Now, in terms of backup goaltenders, there's a theme here on, everybody on this list plays for a pretty decent defensive team. And we just mentioned Winnipeg is number 1. And Connor Hellebuck is at the top of the goalie rankings here. You can see that. But his backup has also benefited from that defensive play. Laurent Brossoit, 3 wins in his last 3 starts, 1.66 goals against, 942 save percentage in that span, 923 on the year, 2.2 goals against on the year. So really good metrics there. If you're in a categories league, that's definitely going to be favorable. If you have him as your G3, he's pretty much winning every time and putting up really good stats. Good defensive team. He's above expected. So all things are pointing in the right direction for Brossoit. 20% owned, so he's available for most of you in a 12-team league. Now, another guy that we kind of have to talk about, and I was pretty high on him earlier, he just wasn't getting the starts, and that's Anthony Stolarz. So Florida is, again, on that list. I believe they're 4th or 5th. Let me just double check. They are tied for 4th. With the same amount, 2.36 goals against over the last month. Stolarz is the backup for sure. Bobrovsky's been very good. As you can see, where does he fall here? He's number 3 on the goalie rankings right now, which I never thought I'd see. I'm not a Bobrovsky fan. So Anthony Stolarz, 2 wins in his last 3 starts, 1.36 goals against, 945 save percentage. He's 6.3 above expected according to Moneypuck. So really good team defense. He's above expected. You're getting good save percentage and goals against. Anytime he's in, he's definitely a guy that you could stream off the waiver wire for 1 game and try to just see if he can put up a good game for you. And on top of that, Florida is 9-1 in their last 10. So they're winning pretty much every night right now. Now, opposite end of the spectrum, Dave Riddick. So LA is not winning every night right now, but they are a good defensive team. You can see 85th percentile there. He is above expected, 3.84. He's got 2 wins in his 3 starts this season, 1.49 goals against, 930 save percentage. So he's been very productive in net for LA when he's been called upon. He's not going to get a ton of the starts because obviously Cam Talbot has the net, but as the backup, if he's ever going to get a start, he's only 3% owned. You can go scoop him up. If you see that green check mark next to his name, you can feel pretty confident that he's going to put up a pretty decent game for you, and he'll probably get the win, but if he doesn't, he'll put up good numbers because he's insulated by that team defense. And last but not least, we will talk about Joel Hofer, and this is another case of, Bobrovsky's way at the top here. He's not my favorite guy to go for in fantasy. You also have Binnington, who's a little bit further down, a little bit behind Ersson and Hart, but Binnington's actually had a pretty decent year, but his backup right now, Joel Hofer, is going through a pretty decent stretch. So 2.28 goals against, 932 save percentage in his last 5 starts. He's slightly above expected. The save percentage at 908 is pretty good, but again, 932 over the last 5. Not getting a ton of wins because this is kind of the nature of St. Louis. They are kind of a middling team, bubble team, so they're not necessarily going to get the run support, but when you see Joel Hofer in, you can probably feel comfortable putting him into your lineup with those kind of numbers and the fact that over the last month, St. Louis is 10th in terms of goals against per game. So they are improving defensively. You don't see it here. They're 21st percentile in expected goals against per game, but they have been tightening it up lately. And so, they just beat the Rangers last week. I watched that game. It was not an impressive effort from that team, but their goaltending was incredible. That was Binnington, but when Hofer's in, it has been much of the same. So these are some options for you. The guys at the top are more starters or 1As. The guys at the bottom are reliable streamers that you can go for. Whenever you see the check mark next to their name, you can feel comfortable picking them up and putting them into your lineup. Now, normally we look at the trending players. I'm going to break that off into a separate video for tomorrow morning so that you can get out ahead of some of these ads in terms of volume, and then we'll take a look at some of the trending players tomorrow, as that will be a little bit longer video. It'll take a little bit more time. So that's going to do it for this one. Thank you all for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one.